Hello and welcome to the Agonizers podcast, episode 3.
The dust hangs heavy on a stained glass night. A static TV is our only light. And for a moment you heard something more. The moment has gone, just a whisper passing by the door. I will hide you, hid my passions in the back room. The street signs flicker in the midnight light as the gentlemen cheer to the last, my dear.
So it's me, Remy77077 again, as always. This time, in fact, I am by myself. There is no guests on this podcast for once. Normally it's guests and having something specific to talk about, of course, that motivates me to do these very irregular podcasts. But maybe if this works out well, it's something I shall do more of as a solo thing. So yeah, this is a little bit of an experiment. Because I'm Billy No Mates right now, clearly. Yes, I mean, I have been doing some recordings of this kind of thing. I've been a guest on other shows. I've been on a couple of other podcasts, a couple of other YouTube chat channels, things like that. So I've really enjoyed doing that. And much like with my YouTube shows, I've kind of get a bit of feedback that when I do things like this, it gets more people's interest than when I do something written. Although I still enjoy writing things as well, I thought I'd give this a go and see how it works. So yeah, so part of the reason I started to write on Agoners at all was because of my sort of propensity to kind of see things a little bit differently when it comes to gaming and things like that. If you want to read about the history of Agoners, we do have an about page right now. But yeah, so this is going to be an interesting show just for me. If it turns up as a bit of a ramble, hopefully it'll still work out okay. The topic, as you will have seen, is about playing games, all kinds of games really, based on their merits. And I'll get into what I mean by that as we explore this topic in a moment. Playing games based on their merit, then. What do I mean by that? I mean, right, we all play good games, right? It's kind of like with baddies in movies or whatever. Like no one actually thinks they're the bad guy, right? No one's doing that Skeletor thing. And for the same thing, I don't think anyone sits there playing, right? Oh, I think this is a rubbish game. I'm going to play it. Well, for the most part, sometimes I do that because I get kind of that agonistic urge to perhaps complete a game, even though I'm not enjoying it. I still want to finish it, and I get that kind of desire to complete things. So this is why I have to be careful what games I get into at times, because I sometimes kind of bullheadedly waste my time in some ways. But for most people, and most of the time for myself, right? You don't generally put a lot of time and effort and your heart into something you don't think that's good, right? I mean, but what I kind of getting at is here. This is a very, very tricky topic to discuss, really. So it's something I've been thinking about for a long time. I did want to originally write an article, but I thought I'd try and put this down into a podcast. So, yeah, I mean, do you really play the games the most that you think are the very best, or do you perhaps leave them, not play them as much for some reason, or you play something else? And how do you even try and find and figure out what is the best game? And I'm talking about, the best game for you, right? It's going to be different for everyone else. Everyone's going to have their own taste of things. But yeah, it's something that I think about, and it's how do you try and find these kind of games, and how much effort do you put into it? Because it's not that simple when it actually boils down to it. Now, obviously, you can focus on the game mechanics and things like that, and that's often what people tend to say that they like in a game they enjoy. But actually, you've got graphics, you've got the overall style. You might like the characters, you might like the stories. There's all sorts of things that why the games you play appeal to you, right? But I mean, we can throw those all in as a kind of general quality of game for you, right? I don't want to be just okay. This is purely some kind of mechanical theory thing of, you know, this particular board game or something, but it's bits of square paper, and actually I prefer a video game, or all that kind of comes into it as well. So, um, I mean, so that's I think some way I'd like to think about this is why wouldn't you be playing what is theoretically, let's call it in air quotes, the best game for you, right? Um, so as I say, one factor, huge factor, is that to figure out even what is going to be the best game for you is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of effort, perhaps, on your part, and it's going to take quite a lot of experience and sort of self awareness as well. So, I mean, it comes to someone like myself. I'm obviously getting on a bit in the older age now, and I've played tons and tons of games through my life. I've it's always been a big part of my life. It's always been a big passion of mine, as you can probably tell by the fact I've run a website for 15 years about gaming, and even before that, I remember a chat in school once, and one of my friends just sort of turned around to me and said, "You're just a big gamer, aren't you?" And I thought, and this was like, wow. And this is before the term gamer and things was popularized, and I was like, you know what? He's kind of nailed it. Yeah, it is like one of the major things I enjoy in life. So I mean, and I've always played lots of things. I've played everything from card games, dice games, board games, video games, obviously, just miniatures games, as you all know. I'm into those at the moment as well. If you follow Agoners on social media and our website and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I've really feel like I've experienced such a breadth and depth of games. But even I don't get to try everything, right? Um, but sometimes, because of my experience playing a lot of other games, I can also very quickly sort of count out things. So, for example, fighting games, I've been sort of criticized in the past for not giving it perhaps a new game, or like a good look in, or well, you've not tried it yet. How do you know you don't like it, right? But the thing is, again, this comes down to that personal experience. So I can take sort of one look at some of the mechanics in a fighting game, and I know very quickly that that game isn't going to be something I'm going to find that fun. So, or I mean, this might be the game overall. It could even just be a specific character even within a game. If I know from experience, so except look at combo systems, for example, in a fighting game. I do know that I do not enjoy long combos, and I don't enjoy hard execution long combos in particular. But even simpler ones where it might be okay, yeah, maybe I can pull that combo off reliably, but it's such a long string, and I've got to be constantly hitting buttons and all this kind of stuff, and it's non-interactive. I've got to sit there in the training room just learning this thing. Um, that kind of system immediately kind of turns me off, and I know I'm not going to get into it. Right? It's just I'm going to choose to play something else. It doesn't match my taste, and I've got years and years and years of experience to know this. So if I see a fighting game system that demands, say, it's got some kind of burst system to escape long combo strings, or it's maybe got combo breakers, something like that, right? I can look at that and go, okay, the fact that even exists in this fighting game instantly tells me this isn't the kind of game I'm going to appreciate myself, right? Um, or I'll say about characters, for example, I did used to play a lot of Street Fighter Five. One of my favorite characters, if you go way, way, way back, you'll know is Dan from Street Fighter overall. I usually love Dan in most games he's in. I find him hilarious, and it's a good challenge, and yeah, all that kind of thing to try and do well with him, even though he kind of sucks, right? He's always a bit of a joke character. But Street Fighter Five Dan took one look at that, and I was like, I'm instantly not interested, because he is all based around massive, long, extended combo type mechanics, rather than the things that classically was what drew me to Dan. Was actually kind of like he had even less of that, generally speaking, than other characters. So you were trying to get those stray hits and things like that to do good good work with. But anyway, without going too much into the detail and the weeds of that, that again, it could be a character within a game as well. The other thing, when you come to talk about video games, again, I know from experience of execution, like I know my limits, and people often say, well, you can't, you need to practice more. You could get good at this and all that kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, but I've spent decades and decades. I have gone through serious, proper training regimes trying to learn execution and improve my execution at long combos and difficult things in Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 5. I've had like massive spreadsheets, training every day, doing the classic, you need to spend a little bit of time every day learning this. So like I wouldn't kind of allow myself to play fun matches online until I'd gone through a training regime, and I'd record my statistics of how I was getting better or worse and what I put it this way. I put a lot of effort into improving my execution skills, and for the most part, it didn't work. Right? I am very bad, believe it or not, executionally in most fighting games, in the traditional fighting games, right? And despite my sort of tournament success and high rankings, I mean, even in Street Fighter 5, I was in like when I was playing it actively, I think I was in the top 3 to 5% of players online or something like that, which is it's not bad when you look at it that way, right? And it's like, well, tournaments things, I was usually coming through to the the upper quartile even, or the upper half at very least if the tournament standard was very high. So like I'm actually all right, but this doesn't mean I'm good at the mechanical aspects of that game. I'm actually terrible at it, and it's like of everything else that I have to make up for, and that can be fun, but at the same time, I also know when I'm going to hit my limit, right? I can look at a combo thing and go, right, that I'm never going to be able to achieve that because I've tried for decades in the past to achieve maybe that or something maybe even simpler that I know I can't do. So again, these kinds of knowledge and experience and time and effort you've put in the past is something you might, I can do in certain game genres like that. But if I look at, say, team-based first-person shooter or something, it's a lot harder for me to instantly analyze some mechanics I see and figure out, okay, would I potentially get into this game or not? I probably can because I will look at the overall game design, various other things that I, particularly talk about. So if you look at Agoners, of course, I've talked lots about how to do accurate team ranking and matchmaking and all those kind of peripheral systems that I know how I want them to work. And if they don't work like that, I'm kind of, well, okay, instantly I'm going to have an issue. This game probably isn't going to be the best kind of game that I would want to play. Right, but yeah, as I say, mechanically though, it can be very tricky. So that's a very good reason why someone might not be really playing the best kind of game for them. And you can apply the same logic to other types of games like board games and miniatures games, things like that as well, right? I mean, there's a lot of inertia with a lot of those games as well, particularly when you talk about miniatures. It's like, well, if you've got a large collection of models, you've got a large collection of perhaps painting effort you've put in, all those kind of things. Like there's a reason why you might stick to not put the time and effort into perhaps trying out something else, right? And that immediately gets to my second big reason why you might not be playing the best game for you, and that's community, right? How much do you prioritize that? So, when talking again, miniatures games, right? One of the first things you might be thinking is, well, have I got a friend to play this with? Do I know other people? Do I know a community? I mean, I got asked this the other day. I had a friend interested in playing Ninth Age, and he was one of his questions, quite understandably so, was is what's the community like in the city we live in, Sheffield? And I was like, well, it's fairly small at the moment, but it's growing. I'm interested. I know this guy, this friend of yours, you also know. You perhaps didn't realize he plays it too. He's interested in a game. Like, I could answer that question in a fairly positive way, but perhaps for another game it might have been like, well, actually, no, I don't really know anyone that plays that, so yeah, you're on your own there, dude. So sorry. So that's another huge thing, right? And how much that matters to you might depend on the type of game. It might depend on how much time you have. But it's and this particularly applies, of course, to the kinds of games I like. So Agoners, obviously, we do talk a lot about challenging games as well. So it could be single player games where perhaps this wouldn't matter, but generally speaking, as if you follow me at all, I very much tend towards the competitive games, and the social games, things where I want to be involved playing things with other people, right? That's absolutely key in most of my interests. Um, Even with more casual games that I do get into, it's actually fairly unusual I play any kind of game that isn't that's single player. Like there are some I've very got much got into over the years, but especially now when my time's quite limited, I really tend to prioritize things that I've got things that have other people involved, so sort of community things, if you like. So with competitive games, especially, it's completely natural that you might prioritize, like say, a large community, um, or something like that in what you will choose to play, rather than playing something you actually think is more fun, perhaps, right? So, and again, I'm not knocking that at all, right? And for some competitive players, this is such a draw, right? They actually kind of actively need to see that large competitive community, like to fuel their drive, if you like. That's what gets them interested and or keeps them interested in a game. And I can certainly feel that at times. So yeah, I mean that's another right reason, right? So there's that thing. There's another kind of third reason that's not quite as solid, in my opinion, as those two things that I've talked about. So it's the time, effort, experience thing, and then there's the community aspect, right? Then the next one is, oh, I mean, sorry, community as well. I mean, talking about board games and miniatures games, of course, like especially board games, right, or role playing games even. Like you probably need like a group of maybe more than just someone else to play against now. Now you need a group of 4 to 6 people perhaps that are all kind of intrigued or interested in this. And you actually sometimes see it go the other way, where people kind of build the community first and then slot different games into that community. So again, that makes sense as well on a small scale type of thing, of course, for board gamers particularly. You see that kind of thing happening. Um, yeah, sorry. Onto my third reason. I guess this sense of playing the latest hype thing, like that's the reason I kind of see it. It's related to community, I guess, because sometimes it might be about chatting with your friends, sort of playing, especially maybe if you're a content creator as well and you're making online videos or whatever. Like you're going to get more views. If it's something contemporary, perhaps like it's more popular. There's a lot of reasons why just this kind of hype machine of the internet these days and things can draw you in because you see someone. All right, now so it happens obviously outside of gaming. It's movies, things like that, music even. Some people are really drawn by this, actually, perhaps more than they really consider they are. um but it's something I definitely think about quite a lot. So yeah, I mean, it sounds negative to say this, but like, if you might just be playing something because your friends told you about it, right? Like someone told you to play it, or you might be you're affected by advertising, you're affected by reviews, like all that kind of stuff all plays into what you play, right? So you really, if you are being affected by that kind of thing, and it's practically impossible not to be, right? Again, this is another kind of reason where you might not really be playing what the best thing for you. Um, some players might be very very aware of this. So one thing I see quite frequently, and this is particularly when you're talking at the top end, sort of professional players almost, but maybe within esports games, things like that. I mean, they definitely accept playing games and things that perhaps they don't like the most, but it's because they know that's where the money is. That's where that's another thing. I mean, that's kind of ties into community, right? But yeah, for some players, especially the top end, it can be a huge factor, of course. Like, yeah, so it's always very difficult, really, to say that what people do play is kind of purely based on the merit of the game for them, right? There's all these things working against you, as it might be if you look at it in that way. Um, so yeah, but when I think about my attitude to it, and this is where I definitely accept that I am a complete oddball, right? Because I don't know what it is about my personality. Some people just say I'm a hipster, right? But like I feel it's something I work against. Like, so again, putting in the time and effort, experience to try and figure out what is the best game for me. That is something I tend to do a lot of. I don't tend to prioritize community very much, and ridiculous as it might seem, I actually kind of work against what things I see as the latest type. I'm like, I'm not really interested. Like, I want things to almost prove their mettle by not being the latest type, yet people still are into it, right? That kind of shows me something. Like something's got a bit of longevity. That starts to get me more interested. So, I mean, I sometimes won't get in on the cusp of a lot of these things. Um, so yeah, but I know I'm such an oddball. It applies to almost every kind of thing I play within gaming, and yeah, I'm like kind of I take a lot of an attitude of like I'd rather play. I really want to play something I think is genuinely good when it comes to games because that seems the most valuable thing to do with my time personally, right? And but I'm also willing to not play at all. So there's certain genres of gaming which I'll get to later, which I basically haven't played in an incredibly long time, even though they're some of my favorite games, types of games, right? But if there's nothing there that I enjoy, there's nothing there I think's good enough, like the merit for whatever however you want to define that isn't there for me. Even though there might be a huge community, it might be hype, like it might be easy for me to do that, right? I just never seem to go with the flow. Basically, um, I am just yeah. I know this makes me really unusual. Um, it just makes me quite different, but it's just something I find hard to identify with, and why I kind of wanted to talk about this because yeah, it's something I've thought about. So yeah, it's maybe it's just like I don't know, almost like a kind of reverse peer pressure thing. If I see a lot of marketing and maybe even a big community or something, like even for competitive games, like it won't that isn't enough for me. Like whereas conversely, if I can find a game I really enjoy and there's some level of competition there. Maybe it's a very small community, um, like, but that's fine. Like, I'm happier doing that. I'm happier kind of um, trying to, even some to extent, well, I will have to build my own community, right? This is something I'm actually having to do a little bit in the miniatures wargaming space. So one of the games I'm really interested in fact, most of the miniatures games I'm really interested in, none of them have a big community existing right now in this within Sheffield where I live, right? So so in the sort of nearby areas. So I'm having to kind of start from scratch with all of them. Um, but I'd rather do that, right? It sounds strange, but like if I think the game's really good, I will kind of go to bat for it, right? And I want to, I think I think the merit is there, and I think other people would perhaps get into it if they just knew about it, and perhaps they need to see that that community is there, so to get them to give it a shot, and that's something I'll try and do. But but yeah, conversely, if I don't think there's a game there that I'm not interested in, I'll just not play. Right? Even as far as I talked earlier about how much gaming has meant to me in my life in general. But but sometimes, like even right now, I'm barely playing any video games because nothing has really appealed to me that much. So yeah, this has happened for long stretches of a time. So yeah, I mean, I'll give one example. American football video games. And it's actually what got me interested in American football as a sport itself. And whilst I still really, really enjoy the sport, and I'm a big fan, and I watch it every week in the season and all that kind of stuff, probably multiple games, um, I haven't played a single American football video game. I have played a few to small extent, but there hasn't been really one that's really got me into it for a really, really long time. And I basically just don't play those games anymore, even though that used to be a huge chunk of my gaming time. So, but this is because I probably know it's dominated, the market is most dominated, and the online gaming scene, especially, is driven by a terrible, terrible game called Madden. Now, Madden used to be good back in the very, very old days. I did discover it as actually it was the game on the Commodore Amiga, and then moving a little bit into the SNES that got me into it. But even by the SNES, I was kind of like, actually, this game isn't that good. I tried dozens and dozens and dozens of American football games, and I discovered one called Tecmo Super Bowl, which I thought was way more fun than Madden for as a single player experience. Um, but yeah, it's so yeah. But anyway, but basically, the market is just doesn't make the kind of games I enjoy right now. There are some other good football video games that I've tried to get into. There's sort of offshoot spin-off ones that but yeah, there was one I can't remember. I think it's called Gridiron. There's one where you actually play as a single player and it's online team versus fantastic for me, but unfortunately, it's mouse and keys. It basically demands mouse and keys. You can theoretically play it on a pad as I was, but you're at a massive disadvantage. And if you know me, I cannot play hardcore competitive Twitch mouse keys games because of problems with repetitive strain injury RSI. So I literally just couldn't play that game, unfortunately, even though I thought it would be fantastic, and I hope to see games like that do well. And I had one great experience of that where I was just joined this sort of jumped into this pickup game online, and everyone was on voice mics, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And I was playing, I think I was playing a safety, and everyone was kind of running around like headless chickens, but I just stayed there on the goal line. I don't think I got an interception, but I batted down a pass and essentially like won the game for my team just by going with the play and not trying to be a hero. And yeah, got a lot of people shouting and screaming at me online how impressed with it. So I really loved that. It was my one good experience of that game. And then there's other ones. I guess there's I've forgotten the name, but there's Rivals C. I think it's called Rivals. Yeah. Anyway, Rivals something or other, Football Rivals maybe. That's quite interesting. But again, the problem is like a lot of these indie smaller football games. They have some very good game mechanics. They obviously can't compete graphically with the big games. That wouldn't be too much of an issue for me, but what they also don't have is proper online gaming, like competitive gaming scenes, and I don't have anyone locally I can play against. So I really, again, this is now. See, now you're seeing the chink there. Hang on, you said you didn't care about community. Well, I do compare if I can't play anyone at all, right? That unfortunately takes a lot of these games. Whilst I still buy some of them to support them and hope they grow, if I have zero people I can play against, right? Because there's no online system and I don't know anyone locally who's interested, then that really does start to that's too much even for me. So if I had just one or two people, I might be happy, right, with some of these games. But yeah, I mean, and then talking about my history with American football video games, of course, the 2K series of games, whilst when they were allowed to be made, were absolutely fantastic. And if you look back in my history, I used to play NFL 2K5 and All Pro Football 2K8, and I went to huge lengths. This is again putting in that time and effort stuff, right? I discovered these games, discovered they were fantastic, loved playing them online, but in the UK, they basically weren't sold, right? There was no online system for 2K5. I had to do loads of shenanigans to get online with that, and 2K8 was even worse because it didn't get released in the UK whatsoever in a PAL, so I had to order an American Xbox 360, play via the American Xbox Live thing, and it was I used to play these games online. I'm sure people hated playing me because a lot of the time the connections online were terrible, and they were sort of like, "What the heck? This game's so slow and everything." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm playing from the UK, dude," and they're like, "What?" They're like, "Oh," so they'd never seen anyone playing from Europe before because it didn't get released in Europe, so the market in Europe was basically non-existent. But again, these games were so much better than the other games, in my opinion. For me, for sure. Like you can argue if you want about the quality, like I was saying earlier, but for me, I sort of determined these are the games I think are the best in the American football scene of video games. These are the ones I want to play. But now there's nothing else. There's just nothing I can play, right? There's no online game realistically that I can get into, and so I just haven't played anything in about 20 odd years, really. Dipped in and played bits and bobs, to say single player things, but it doesn't, that's not what, unfortunately, not what I'm after when it comes to American football games, right? So that's a good example of my weird attitude to all of this, I guess. I mean, and then I guess another thing I talk a lot about is tabletop miniatures games recently. And if you've read Agoners, you'll see this is talking about this sort of time and effort thing. I got back into this idea of wanting to paint miniatures and play some games with them. And I actually did an enormous amount of research. Like I spent months, and I still do it, right? If I see a new game system, I'm like instantly looking it up. And if I think it suits the miniatures I have, which is what I know. Again, so there's a bunch of factors. So I know from experience, for example, and from, again, my existing collection of models and things that I want to use, that I really enjoy fantasy games more than, say, sci-fi games. A lot of that is actually to do with mechanics, weirdly. It comes down to the thing where get miniatures games where every model has ranged attacks, I've generally found far less interesting than like lower tech games. And similarly, I've always found a ranks and flanks style of game there's this kind of blocks and maneuvering and battle lines and that kind of stuff. I've always found that way more interesting than skirmish type games, where every model's moving around individually, usually, or maybe in small squads, but they're all kind of flying around all over where they want to go. And there's less, there may be some kind of facing type rules, but basically what it comes down to, I think, in both aspects of preferring games where perhaps the lower ranged technology, let's put it that way, and wanting ranks and flanks. I think it comes down to the fact that always tends to enhance the movement and positioning aspect of the game, which is the bit I enjoy the most. Whereas once you get, again, this is a tendency. This obviously can be definitely a tendency that can be differently designed around, and different games could offer different things. But for my personal preference and for my personal experience, I've generally found games with long range attacks on every model and games that tend to be skirmish, they tend to be much more about sort of your list building, how you equip your guys, and what dice you roll. If you get lucky or not, right? I mean, dice are a factor in all these games, but those tend to enhance that, where it's like, well, I've got this shot, but it just comes down to do I roll it or not. And there's not much tactical play that me or the opponent can have, right? So yeah, it just tends to mean that there are less aspects to the main movement and positioning in those kind of games. So again, this is an experience thing. Putting in the effort, as I say, I looked out there, I discovered all these games. I was like, okay, what's this Ninth Age thing? What's this Kings of War? These are games I'm really interested in playing. Then they do have a bit of a community, but again, I'm having to build it a little bit to an extent. There's another game called Battlegrounds Fantasy Warfare, which is actually a card game, and I know zero people that play that currently. But it's actually still in my top 3 games, something I really want to play, and I definitely will figure out a way to play that one day. But yeah, right now, if I stick on 0 opponents, then yeah, I'll probably have to ditch it, right? Because I need at least 1 or 2 people interested. But then you look at the opposite end of it. Obviously, a lot of people just play the biggest games in town, right? Because if you value that kind of marketing, that being with the hype, that having a large community you can instantly go and play with, or you just you don't have the time and effort to perhaps research things and figure out and try out lots of games, right? You're probably going to go and you're probably going to end up playing something by, if you're in the UK at least, the biggest games are obviously things by Games Workshop, so you're probably going to end up playing Age of Sigmar or 40k or one of these games. Now, I don't really rate those games, right? Admittedly, I'm out of touch with all of them, but at least Age of Sigmar, I have had a good read of the rules things, and it just doesn't interest me. So, and I've also generally, again, this is an experience thing. I know that the way they tend to write their rules and things doesn't appeal to me. So and again, talking about new games coming out, I've recently, a friend sort of joked to me that he was sort of, well, may have been joking, I was like, I'm ready to jump on the bandwagon for Warhammer: The Old World. And I'm kind of like, well, that's a bit weird. Why wouldn't you play something that you know is good? Like, you've played a bit of Ninth Age, you know it's good, you could play it now. But I'm only interested because of this hype machine that Games Workshop have generated or whatever. And it's like, again, this is the opposite to how I see gaming. And although I will certainly give games like that a try, it's part of my research, right? I definitely am not ever the person who's going to jump on, like, ever describe myself as jumping on a bandwagon. That's like actually the opposite of how I tend to react to this kind of thing. And as I say, makes me an absolute oddball, to be fair. So yeah, and then another one I should talk about, of course, is fighting games. Obviously, I've been very into Fantasy Strike and tried to build up a bit of a scene for that, but have struggled. And I say right now, I could do a whole podcast on why I'm not playing it that much right now. But we did build up a bit of a scene in Europe, because even though it has very good netcode, unfortunately, I still can't realistically play properly valid games against a lot of the best players in America, because they're just too far from me. And probably likewise similar difficulties now it's out in Japan, although I do want to give it a try and see if I can get some good games against Japanese players online. That would be pretty sweet, right? But then again, looking back into my history, sort of the first real fighting game that I really got a chance to get into to a tournament degree was Street Fighter 2 HD Remix, and obviously that is still probably my overall favourite fighting game of all time, and I absolutely played a ton of it. And I was really into it. I went to the biggest offline tournaments, things I could. I went to like 3 or 4 big tournaments. I ended up helping run one of them, and but But now, since that game has basically gone away now, I'm just not that interested. Again, this is that thing of like, well, people, oh, we could play Super Turbo, right? ST, but I'm just no, it's not as good as HDR. It just isn't. Um, I mean, well, I could say that's about merit and things, but honestly, no, factually, it's not good, right? So yeah, you listen to my other podcast if you want to know more about that. Agonizers number one, and that will be fully explained for you. And you'll probably disagree with me, but that's fine. But yeah, no, HD Remix anyway was definitely my favorite fighting game, but I don't have it anymore, so I don't really have a fighting game. And then so yeah, again, I just haven't. Although yeah, Phantom Strike been into that. It's like again, I'll pick and choose. I tried to get to Street Fighter Five. Did do like it. I think it's a decent game. It has a lot of things that I do like about it, but overall, it isn't fully for me. And I kind of hit an execution wall there and realized like this is stuff I actually can't do now. As the game expanded and got more and more mechanically complex, I got actually started to lose interest in it. But big story of that one as well. Won't go too far into that for now. Um, the other interesting one you see with fighting games scene, of course, is there had been quite a big debate about netcode, and people are sort of saying, "Oh, why don't you play these games that have got good netcode? Right? You should support the good netcode and support the good developers." And but instead, you still see people sort of, "Oh, but I just play Tekken, or I just play Street Fighter, right?" And it's kind of like, and then I was like, "What? But the netcode's trash," and they're like, "Yeah, I know, but it's what I want to play." And I think again, it comes back to these things, right, that we've been talking about here. Why is it they want to play those games? And it's like either it's easy to just go with them. They haven't, maybe haven't got the time and experience, and maybe they don't want to put effort into learning whole new game systems, things like that. Makes complete sense to me. They've already probably got a big community with those games. They've got friends that play it. There's a big inertia factor there, and perhaps the hype of all the bigger tournaments and money for pro players, all that kind of stuff, right, feeds into it. So I would be the exact opposite, of course. I'm the sort of person that'd be like, right, I'm gonna play something else, right? That's got good netcode because I want to support that, and I'm gonna play again. That's part of the merit of a game, right? How good can you play it online? That all factors into it. But again, I can see reasons why people don't do that. Yeah. Um, yeah, and that's pretty much my main point, really. On this, there's good reasons to really not play games based on merit. Maybe you want to have a think about it though. Like if you've never thought about this, you might want to. Maybe you would get more out of it to do put a bit of extra effort in. Maybe put a bit of maybe forget about communities and forge your own path a little bit. Maybe you'll find something. Maybe you'll end up like me. Maybe not the happiest place to be all the time. It can be very frustrating to think this game's fantastic. Why can't I find anyone else to play it with and things like that, right? But still, maybe you'll find some value in that. I think it actually even within other kinds of games I've not talked about, and perhaps even in walks of life, right? And other entertainment things, it kind of applies. It's almost like getting a little bit philosophical here, but yeah, I mean, I was thinking about paper and dice RPGs. That's something I used to be really into, and obviously they're very popular these days. And online is really livened that scene up as well. People can do it remotely, even through pandemic times, things like that. But I just see everyone sort of, or not everyone, but a lot of people sort of default. I play D&D, right? And I'm like, have you tried other games? Is D&D really the best system for you? Maybe you want to look at something else. Maybe you'd like it more. Or competitive card games, collectible card games. Should you play Magic the Gathering, right? Should you look at other games, right? How much are you playing if you're just gonna go and play the biggest thing because it's there? Like, or are you gonna actually have a look and try out different kinds? I mean, that's a difficult one because a lot, especially when you talk about collectible card games, right? It's a lot of investment in money and time to collect decks and things like that. Maybe you've got some friends though. Maybe you can play some games, borrow some cards. Maybe you can find out that way. Even stuff like I mentioned movies earlier, right? But it's like, do you just go and see the latest Hollywood blockbuster, or do you actually kind of seek out more, right? I mean, again, I'm the kind of person where I'm just like, I have no interest in the big hype, like all your Marvel rubbish and stuff. I have no interest whatsoever. But my partner says to me the other day, "Oh, do you want to watch this award-winning Korean film?" And I'm like, "Yeah, great." And it's all subtitles, and I don't care. It's fantastic. It was like really interesting, and I can't remember what it was called because that's the way my brain works. Sorry about that. But this is the thing. Again, I'm a little bit like this in all kinds of walks of life, really. To be fair, so I do think it's almost like a personality trait when it comes to me. And then music and things. I know people that are like, oh, I just listen to what Spotify gives me kind of thing. I just put it on, play music, or maybe in the old days you'd maybe just listen to the radio and just like follow what's on the radio, right? But like again, I'm not like that. I will seek out genres and obscure bands, and I'll go on Bandcamp and I'll buy and support all that kind of the smaller indie things. I don't I the kind like there are definitely some kind of internet podcast things that I like, but again they're very specifically things I've found, and this specific thing gives me new music I like. I try and find out things on my own. It's like, again, getting very hipster, I know, but you get my point, right? Again, maybe you'd get more out of it. Maybe just taking what's given to you almost like might not be the best for you. Maybe it is though. Maybe you're just happy. I think like many things, again, if we get a bit too philosophical and kind of it is a case of like you've kind of got to almost pick your battles, make your choice in life in some ways. Like it's obviously impossible to put that time and effort into. You can't be an aficionado of everything, right? Sometimes you just want to go along with the flow. You just want to play, and again, as I've said here, the whole point of this really is to say there's good reasons for that. Like a lot of the time, people are just going to play what's popular, right? There's kind of good reasons for it. But maybe if there's something you really get into, like you might find this, you might find something really exciting. You might find that hidden gem or something like that, and maybe that's a feeling I'm addicted to. Maybe that's my problem. Well, enough of that for now, guys. Hopefully that does justice to this topic. As I say, I could have written out a massive article, but hopefully it makes sense in podcast form and it's not too boring just listening to my voice. But yeah, well, hopefully next time I'll do a shorter one. We'll see. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Goodbyes, apologize. Take your exit. This is your last communication. Has that conversation.
That is it for this episode. If you'd like to have some links or see a post where you can comment and discuss, or just read more of our articles about gaming, you can go to our website at agoners.wordpress.com. That's Agoners. You can also follow at Agoners on Twitter. You can also search for Agoners. We are on YouTube and Twitch. The music in this show was all provided by the absolutely wonderful Promenade Cinema. The intro was taken from a song called Passions in the Back Room. The interlude was from a track called Fading in the Arcade. And this ending music is Cassette Conversations. I'm not sure when the next episode of Agonisers will be along, but hopefully a little bit sooner this time. And let me know if you like this one, and do follow us at those addresses mentioned previously to keep in touch with us.